What is up, my friends? Welcome back to another video, and today I want to share with you how to write a beautiful melody like John Williams. And we're going to be taking a look at one of his most famous melodies and themes from Superman called Can You Read My Mind? Now, this song is relatively old, but it is a classic for a reason, and it's very memorable. I personally think it's probably one of the most beautiful love themes I've ever heard in my life, and I think a lot of people would agree on that, but you may not, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about Can You Read My Mind? We'll kind of discuss three things that really make a memorable melody and how John Williams has actually used them in this theme itself, and then how we can apply it ourselves as well. So before we do that, I want to give you a free guide as a thank you for watching this video, and it's called How to Write Thematic Music in the Style of Disney and Nintendo. And this guide is really all about how to write beautiful music that pulls at the heartstrings and makes us feel emotional in those particular styles of like Disney music, like classic Disney, Alan Menken type of stuff. And in terms of Nintendo, it's more like the Super Mario Galaxy themes that really have these expansive orchestral scores that really make us feel larger than life and just really inspired and motivated. So I kind of went through and pulled some different concepts together and put them all within this one guide. And I wanted to give that to you totally free. So if you want to click the link in the description box below, it'll take you straight there. And hopefully you'll find it helpful when you're writing your next theme or chord progression. Anyway, let's kind of dive into Can You Read My Mind? So as you can see, I've already done a little bit of marking here, and this is particularly for an upcoming course actually, or upcoming training, I should say, on how to write love themes. But I wanted to use an example for this video. So essentially, I've kind of mapped out how the range of the melody itself is larger than an octave, and then it kind of falls down an octave after that. But generally, you'll see as a little, I guess, prelude to the 3 points, you'll notice that the key of the song is in F major, right? And notice there are very, very few accidentals, if any. The only accidentals, which are sharps and flats that show up next to individual notes, are these A flats right here. And that's because we're going slightly out of key. And so it makes sense to have the melody kind of follow along for that. But generally, the melody is very, very diatonic. So that's kind of a familiarity thing where when you're writing a love theme, you want to make sure your overall feeling and the overall approach to the song is relatively diatonic or belonging to the major or minor scale, rather than having too many modulations or writing in different modes and stuff like that. So anyway, the very first thing that I think that makes a memorable melody is deciding on a form of structure. Okay, so when writing themes, there are generally two structures that are commonly accepted for type of romantic themes, let's say, or catchy themes. The first one is the period, and the period is basically when you have the main theme or a basic idea, and then you kind of have another idea right after that. So in this case, it's like a 2-bar idea. Then the next 2 bars are kind of developing that first idea, or they're just a contrasting idea. And then they kind of end on a cadence. Usually it's a half cadence or an imperfect cadence. Then the second phrase kind of starts off the same way as the first phrase. So the first, the basic idea is basically repeated, but then the second half of the second phrase is then variationed. That's not even a word, but there's a variation on the second half as compared to the first phrase in the second half. So the period is very, very common, and that's actually what John Williams has chosen here. The other form is the sentence. So the sentence is where you have a basic idea, and then that basic idea is actually repeated right away in the next half of the phrase, usually with either repeated identically or with a slight bit of variation. And then the second phrase is basically a contrasting idea, or it develops the main idea even further and then ends on a cadence at the very end. So in this case, John Williams has gone for a period. And I love this so much because you can see how structurally sound this phrase is. You see the first 2 bars, it starts off with 2 eighth notes, a dotted quarter, and then another eighth, and then a whole note. So this allows the singer to basically hold that note longer and then take a little breath before carrying on with the next half of the phrase. Then the second phrase basically begins the exact same way with a slight bit of variation due to the lyrics. And also just her way of singing. And then again, another breath, and then, it finishes off with the cadence, basically. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like. I'm going to play it in a very basic manner with the chords in the left hand and the melody in the right hand. right? And so the original actually has orchestration and more stuff to it, but you get a very general sense of what the chords are and how the melody fits within. So notice how, if you were trying to sing this, do, 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 and breath, the chord goes, and then the second half responds to the first half. Do you know that I want you to do to me? And John Williams has actually ended here on a perfect or an authentic cadence. So he landed on the one chord. Then starts off the same in the second half, right? Now we go with a minor 4 chord. So that introduces that A flat on the top, which is like the minor 7th note in the chord. And then back to the 1, so we get a minor plagal cadence there. But notice how both of those phrases end very neatly and end very comfortably. So love themes or romantic themes or memorable themes in general usually have a sense of comfortability and memorability and just repeatability to them. So that's the kind of the first thing you want to keep in mind is you want to choose one of those two structures. Do you want to go with a period where you have a basic theme and then a contrasting idea ending in a cadence, and then that basic idea repeated in the consequent phrase or the answer phrase with a perfect cadence at the end or something? Or do you want a sentence where you have the basic idea, then that same idea is repeated, either with variation or without, but then the second phrase is completely different and ends on a cadence there? That's totally up to you, but those are two common forms you can pick from, and they will typically result in a memorable theme. The second thing you want to consider is the actual note intervals, the actual spaces between the notes. So sometimes here you'll see that there's John Williams takes a kind of a triadic approach here. He's kind of going up the up the chord here, but then he's also doing a larger step. He's going up a 6th here, and then before resolving back down a step. Now look at the second half here. He's kind of just going steps here, stepping down, then we go down a 6th, and then go back up by steps. So this is a great example of interspersing larger leaps, like I would say larger than a 5th and a 6th, with stepwise or triadic motion. So triadic motion is really good, obviously, if you want to stay very true to the chord tones and you don't want to introduce any like passing tones or neighbor tones or non-chord tones in general. So in the F major chord, if he sings, "Can you read my mind?" Notice how all those notes in the melody belong to whatever chord is playing at the moment. In the F major chord, the melody is going F, A, C, so it literally outlines that chord, goes up to the 3rd, and then resolves on the root of that chord, which is a G7. And then the second half, then we get some neighbor tones and passing tones, right? Then C7 back to the 1 chord, right? And you get a neighbor tone there with the G going back up to the A. So it's really nice that he kind of decided to go with, a mix of those triad motions and then with some occasional leaps. But there's the leaps and the larger intervals are always being surrounded by more soothing and more commonly, commonly heard stepwise motion, because it leads to a smoother result usually, right? And so that's something to remember as well. So if you want a memorable theme, you want to make sure that your melody doesn't jump all over the place. You want to be able to have a smooth motion, relatively smooth contour. And in terms of contour, I'm just talking about the direction of the notes. So you see they're kind of going up and then they're going back down. They're kind of going back down here, but then they go up a little bit after that. So it's a relatively smooth motion. But in addition to that, the actual distances between the notes are limited more to steps and skips with the occasional leap to increase the emotion of the melody. So very important, that's step number 2, is to intersperse your larger leaps with stepwise motion and occasional arpeggiation as well if you want a smoother melody. Then the third and final thing is to have some sort of rhythmic variation in your melody. So rhythmic variation, I'm just talking about the actual rhythms you choose to make up your melodic phrase. So notice how he starts off with slightly quicker rhythms here with an 8th note pattern or with 2 8th notes. Then we have a dotted quarter, which is a longer note, going to another 8th note to finish the bar, and then a whole note which holds the entire bar, right? So that makes sense, because this one phrase has faster rhythms and then a slower rhythm. And because this is so long, you would expect kind of the next phrase to respond with something a little bit quicker, which we do get. We get 16th notes, and then the very last note here, Do to me. It allows the singer to trail off more naturally, so we hold that note a little longer. Take a breath, start the phrase again. Do you know? Or whatever the words are. Da, 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 you are. Longer notes, and then longer notes, faster notes here. Da, 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 da. You know, you see the idea, right? So interspersing faster notes with shorter notes and kind of making sure there's some variation between those is always a good idea as well. And of course, because the song has lyrics, the melody might also be determined by the actual lyrical content. But just in general, if you're writing a standalone melody, then these are also things you want to consider as well. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Number one is deciding on an actual structure you want to follow. Do you want a period or a sentence? Definitely read up on those if you are interested in learning more. Number two is deciding on how many leaps and stepwise motion you want, like how much do you want your melody to be leaping and jumping versus how much stability do you want in that melody? Usually I would err on the side of stability with the occasional leap and jump for emotional purposes. And then number three is deciding how much rhythmic variation do you want in that melody? Do you want the theme to start off with faster notes and then respond with slower notes, or do you want a mix of both, like kind of what Williams did here with some faster notes and then slower notes and then, you know, faster notes to respond and finish the phrase, or do you want to go the other way around? Just keep in mind that when you have slower note values, they typically accentuate the words a little bit more, right? When you have faster notes, it tends to sound a little more conversational, like the person is speaking faster, right? And so, yeah, the musical melodies can really match lyrics in a very cohesive way. I think we call this prosody, where the lyrics match the music. And so, yeah, these are kind of things we want to think about. And I think I can guarantee you, if you kind of consider these three things and start applying them to your melodies and your lyrics, you are pretty much guaranteed to have a solid melody that's very, very memorable. John Williams has lots of songs, and this is just a very classic example of, you know, one that we can definitely learn from. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Let me know which one of these tips kind of stood out to you the most, maybe one that you want to apply the most. I'd love to hear. And if you want to learn more about how to write memorable themes and chord progressions, definitely download the free guide below. Again, it's all about writing thematic music in the style of Disney and Nintendo, and it kind of goes over those fundamental concepts of how to actually construct melodies and themes, breaking down some classic examples of Disney and Nintendo music and showing you how they all work together to create a beautiful melodic result. Hopefully that helps you. Again, it's my gift to you for watching this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.